A little bit about this book, The Spineless Porcupine. I started writing it in 2013, and it's really an allegory of my life. Maddie was a porcupine born without any spines. She's banished from her clan for being different, and she's quickly picked up by the circus for her commercial potential for being one of a kind. And at first she loves the attention, but soon an emptiness grows deep within. And that's when she meets Pearson, a former headliner in the circus who refuses to perform anymore. And he convinces her that they need to escape the circus because they belong in the wilderness instead of being enslaved under a ringmaster's control. So the chapter I'm about to read is when she starts feeling despondent and loses her drive and strength to perform as a circus headliner. And she's being treated by a vet to try to get her to perform again. And she's held in an isolated cage in the circus. And that's when she has her first conversation with Pearson that becomes a turning point for Maddie. So this is chapter 17, the beginning of the end. Maddie became despondent, feeling she was losing her sanity. She was weak, confused, and didn't have the strength to perform. She didn't know if it was from the vet's sharp and shiny object that was being put in her daily or her heavy heart. For fear of Maddie spreading an infection, Cirque, the ringmaster, placed her in a dark cage away from the active performers. She felt even more isolated, abandoned, and delirious. The first morning Maddie was in the dark cage, just when she thought she was completely alone, she heard a soft growl from the cell next to her. "Who's there?" yelped Maddie, trembling. "I'm Pearson, and you are?" "Maddie," she said. "So that's your real name. I never thought Juniper fit you anyway," said Pearson with warmth. "How would you know? You don't even know me," Maddie barked. The albino creature leaned toward her and said, "I've been observing you for a while now, Maddie. I was filled with despair watching all the animals here in the thrall of the ringmaster, completely blinded to how we're just a commodity to him. But you're different. I could see that you struggled when I mentioned that you were a slave here. You knew it was true. This isn't you. No matter how many tricks you've tackled, it's never enough, and you know there's more. Your heart's tugging at you, just like mine does. We need to get out of here." "Wait a minute, where the heck am I anyway?" Maddie said, confused. "Maddie, you're where those who no longer perform go, tossed aside." "But I can still perform. Get me out of here," Maddie shouted and shook the bars. She did a somersault to prove she was still capable. Pearson shook his head. "What are you doing?" "Performing. It's why we're here, right?" Maddie replied. Raising his left eyebrow, Pearson said, "You really believe that?" "What else is there?" she asked, annoyed. Pearson pointed toward the flap where the sun rays were peeking through, lighting up their gloomy corner, and said, "A whole world exists outside the circus. Have you forgotten where you came from?" "I have no interest in going back out there. I get 3 square meals a day. I have a tent over my head and a safe place to sleep. What else is there to ask for? Plus, my family is here," Maddie said. Slowly, Pearson moved toward her and in a gentle tone asked, "You think they're your family? Have they even tried to check in on you?" Maddie was quiet. After a few moments, Pearson moved closer. "Cirque and Christian have all the other animals brainwashed, but deep down your heart knows the truth. This is not your home." Pearson saw sadness and fear on Maddie's face as the truth of what he said sunk in. She couldn't run from the fact that no matter how hard she tried or how well she performed, Maddie never felt good enough. She never felt like she belonged. Treading lightly, Pearson drew close to the bars between them. He was silent long enough to hear the light pitter-patter from Maddie's tears hitting the cage floor. While Maddie's eyes were closed, he reached his right front leg through the bars, turned his paw upward to avoid hurting her, then tenderly caressed her back. She initially jumped away at his touch, but when she saw the compassion in his eyes, it reminded her of when her mom had removed all of her spines in order to hold Maddie. Maddie felt eased. After a while, she asked, "What do you want from me?" Pearson responded with another question. "Why do you assume I want something?" Because that's the way the world works. Everyone wants something. Whether our family wants us to make them proud or our friends want us to ease their loneliness, the other performers want us to make them look good, or the ringmaster wants to make the show a success. Pearson put the back of his paw gently on Maddie's cheek and said, "Oh, Maddie, you see so much, but you refuse to do anything about it. Aren't you tired of living according to what others want?" "It's all I know," Maddie said. Pearson caressed her face again and said, "I spent my entire life trying to earn everyone's acceptance. My parents loved me but once they passed, I had no one to shelter me from rejection. I eventually ran away and got captured after the love of my life, Hannah, didn't want to start a family with me. All she could see was my white fur, and she didn't want our kids to grow up with the same stigma. But we can't run and hide from our pain forever." Maddie's heart melted. She knew exactly what it was like to be rejected based on something that was completely out of your control. But when she pulled away, afraid of being taken advantage of in her vulnerability, Maddie growled, "And why should I trust you?" "You're right. Don't listen to me. Listen to your heart. Ask yourself, do you really want to keep living this way? I'm not interested in hearing about what others want for you. What do you want?" asked Pearson. Just thinking of going back to the treadmill to either constantly build new traps, learn new tricks, or perform for different crowds every night exhausted Maddie. "I'm tired," she said. "You have nothing to prove. That's all an illusion," Pearson responded. "How do you know?" "I'm not banished to this corner because I can't perform. It's because I decided that my worth doesn't need to be proved. There's nothing worse than betraying yourself for the approval of others, so I decided to stop doing it," Pearson said. This was a completely foreign concept to Maddie. Pearson continued, "It isn't love if you have to perform for it. It isn't acceptance if you have to pretend for it. We exist on this planet for love, and acceptance is more vital than the air we breathe. You long for belonging just as I do. And the good news is that even though we might not have gotten that from our own flesh and blood, we can become family with those whose hearts resonate with ours, and we can heal together. Maddie, you've caused my heart to come alive again in this dark place, which is why I want to help you." Maddie couldn't deny that her heart began to burn whenever Pearson spoke. But whenever her mind tried to imagine a life without having to perform and pretend, all she saw was a future shrouded in darkness, and she cringed. The truth was, Maddie had no clue what she wanted anymore. She had become so accustomed to reading what others wanted and to pleasing them that she had forgotten how to read and satisfy her own heart. The thought of her returning to herself overwhelmed her. "Stop putting fantasies in my head. This is all there is to life," Maddie yelled. Pearson was quiet. Maddie eventually fell asleep with tears streaming down her cheeks. Pearson stayed awake, watching over her protectively, knowing she was fragile. She was starting to transition. Though her body slumbered, her heart was awakening. The end of that chapter. Thank you.